Kia ora koutou katoa. Fasting is probably the most well-known of the Lenten disciplines. Abstinence from certain foods, rich foods usually, like butter, meat or alcohol, for 40 days of Lent was, particularly in times past, widely practiced. People cleaned out their cupboards of luxury items by Shrove Tuesday, making pancakes and the like. Then, excluding the Sundays, they went without until the festival of Easter. Wealthy members of society could find ways around such constraints, like they usually do. And the church found ways to benefit from such ways around constraints. These days, fasting is seen more as something that one does for one's health, a detoxification from the excesses of those rich foods that don't benefit our hearts, waistlines or livers. So, Dry July, alcohol-free July, is now a thing, and Feb Fast is becoming known. The latter, in case you hadn't heard of it, is an international movement that, I quote, encourages thousands of people to take a 28-day break from alcohol, sugar, junk food, smoking or social media after the December-January holiday season of excess, while raising money to support young people experiencing alcohol and other drug-related problems. The linkage between going without and giving to charity has a long history, and World Vision's 40-hour famine is one such example. While not disparaging of the idea of breaking from our food and drink cravings, if just to prove to ourselves that we can, I'm not sure that going without is at the heart of this Lenten discipline. Consider for a moment the metaphor of carrying a pack when going on a tramp or hike. In that pack you will have what you consider necessary for, let's say, 3 days. There will be food to eat, cooking equipment, some water, clothes for warmth and the cool, a sleeping bag, emergency provisions, and a few non-essential items. Fasting in this metaphor is not going without those non-essential niceties, or trying to reduce the food you're carrying. Rather, fasting, I would suggest, is evaluating everything you are carrying. Consider, for example, the weight and effects of anger that people carry. Today is International Children's Day, and one of the most difficult emotions that children can experience is the anger of adults, particularly adults who are close to them. Adults, in my experience, often aren't aware of how much anger they are carrying in their bodies and minds. It is anger that has built up over the years from a variety of sources due to a variety of causes. Adults often try to keep the anger bottled away, but in times of stress, it can leak out. Road rage is an obvious example. But adults often seem to express displeasure or seem to correct or discipline children with anger in their voice and anger in their actions. And children without the processing skills of adults hear the anger louder and clearer than anything else, except for violence, that is, which often, unfortunately, accompanies the anger and is fueled by it. For children, and I suspect for most adults too, anger gives rise to fear. So my question is, what would it like if everyone gave up anger for Lent? What would it be like if all around the world people stopped being angry and expressing their anger for 40 days and 40 nights? What would it be like if all around the world every child could go to sleep without anger and fear and wake up not afraid of any adult? If we adults could eradicate fear in the lives of children, then there really would be a resurrection of love worth celebrating at Easter. And that dream of eradicating fear starts with an examination of what we individually are carrying in our backpack on this journey of life. Some texts in the Bible have unfortunate, unintended consequences. And the reading for today, John 2:13-22, is one such example. It's a story about Jesus with a whip, driving out cattle and sheep from the outermost court of the Jerusalem temple. He is said to tip over the tables of money changers and told them to stop making my Father's house into a marketplace. Then the writer attaches a verse from the Psalms about zeal, which seems to be justifying Jesus' actions. The crux, though, of this story isn't about this display of so-called righteous anger, or about reforming the so-called Father's house, but actually about destroying it. The temple will be destroyed in 70 CE, some 40 years before this text was written. This text was written in the early, about 110 CE. And the new temple will be Jesus' resurrected life living on in the community of his followers. So holiness will no longer be located at a physical site in Jerusalem, supported by a priestly elite, funded by a tax system on the masses, but holiness will be out and about, there in the midst whenever believers gather, relying not on an elite and surety of funding, but tenuous, transitory. Holiness is not stable and powerful, but fragile and vulnerable. Yet, like most times anger emerges, it is not the crux of the story that are remembered, but that which sparks emotions. And here Jesus, who elsewhere has preached, love your enemies, do good to those who hate you, is depicted as angry and violent. Cleansing the temple, that's what this episode was called in the past, appears in all four Gospels. And whereas progressive scholars believe Jesus spoke against the temple and may have performed some anti-temple act, they don't think this story is historical. Rather, it's been constructed by conflating two verses, one from Isaiah 56:7 and Jeremiah 7:11. So in short, it didn't happen. It's a story written after Jesus' death about the location of holiness, not a story to be quoted to justify so-called righteous anger. The trouble with the notion of righteous anger is that the angry, more often than not, believe their anger and its expression is the right response. The angry believe anger is right. And the person or people in the wrong need to be told so, forcefully, angrily. And for many of the recipients, frighteningly. my long involvement with social justice protest movements, going on such protests, and occasionally being in places of confrontation, is that anger is not helpful. Anger doesn't change the hearts and minds of those who oppose you, or come over well when TV news cameras are present. Anger at injustice, anger at wrongs done to you, while understandable, needs to be transformed into a different type of emotional energy. Those who say they're part of a particular struggle for justice because they're motivated by anger won't last. Lingering anger will eat them up. Those who last have learnt to transform that anger energy, which gives rise to all sorts of things. Transform it into a love and desire to create a better future for everyone. So back to my tramping pack metaphor. We carry a lot of things. Good memories, loves and responsibilities, various scars, pains and half-healed traumas. Not so good memories that are hard to forget. Clutter that others have dumped on us. All these we carry in our backpack. Some things, of course, are very light to carry, and some very heavy. Some things are easy to discard, others very resistant. And this is not just so for individuals. As a community, whether a church community, a city, or a nation, we carry memories and hurts, joys and problems, deep emotions and experiences of loves and fears. The tramping pack metaphor invites us to think about what we are carrying as a community. What is weighing us down, particularly our more fragile or infirm members? What needs looking at, re-evaluating, maybe discarding? And what are the things that help us as a community on the journey? What do we need more of in our pack? Such questions remind me of a passage from 3rd Isaiah. The book of Isaiah is actually written at different time segments. 3rd Isaiah is the last time segment, when members of the Jewish nation who'd been held in captivity in Babylon returned to the mess of their homeland and begun a rebuilding process. Not just of physical buildings like the temple, but the building of community and community values. The words of the prophet's followers, note Isaiah is dead by this time, tell the people that true holiness is not found in worship, but in love for the poor. Isaiah 58, 6-8 reads, "Is this not the fast, the piety that I, God, choose? To loose the bonds of injustice, to undo the thongs of the yoke," remember the yoke around the head of the oxen, "to let the oppressed go free, to break every yoke. Is it not to share your bread with the hungry, and bring the homeless poor into your house, when you see the naked, to cover them?" The passage is clear. It is hunger, homelessness, lack of heating, and other forms of oppression that weigh people down and need to be cast off, put aside, abstained from, in order that the holiness, the righteousness of God will flourish. What is weighing people down, enslaving them, is poverty. So the admonition to the community is to put aside, abstain from, fast from all that contributes to poverty. And the motivation for doing this is not the reward of holiness or the reward from God, but love itself. It is love for others, love for those in poverty, that drives this desire for justice and care for others.